The air hung heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and old pine. Somewhere beyond the overgrown garden, a shattered window caught the last flicker of twilight. The K-9's ears twitched, nose pressed to the cracked frame, refusing to move. For Officer Caleb Trent, the house had always been a symbol of silent decay, abandoned for years, swallowed by weeds and whispered rumors. But tonight, under the chill of a creeping fog, the dog's urgency shattered that quiet. What they uncovered inside would unravel the threads of families past, exposing wounds long buried beneath layers of dust and denial. If you appreciate stories like this, feel free to like and subscribe for more immersive tales rooted in real human emotion and suspense. The old house at the edge of Mill Creek had been forgotten, left to rot behind a tangled fence choked with thorny vines and wild blackberry bushes. It stood like a relic of another lifetime, paint peeling from weatherwood, the front porch sagging unevenly, windows like hollow eyes staring blankly at the gray sky. Caleb Trent's boots crunched against gravel overgrown with weeds as he stepped off his patrol truck and adjusted the collar of his jacket. The damp air clung to him, thick with the smell of moss, wet earth, and something older, something faintly metallic, like rusted iron buried just beneath the surface. Rook, his K-9 partner, sat in the passenger seat, alert and focused, ears twitching at every sound. Caleb glanced down at the dog, feeling the familiar tug of loyalty and unease that always accompanied these calls. The man who'd called in the complaint was an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Hawthorne, whose small farm bordered the property. She'd heard noises, crying, whispering, coming from inside the abandoned house. Caleb had been out on patrol late, and without backup, it was just him and Rook. He unclipped the leash and gave it a gentle tug. Rook sprang forward, nose to the ground, tail low but wagging in cautious anticipation. The broken window caught the last fading light of the afternoon, a jagged opening in the west-facing side of the house, shards of glass still clinging stubbornly to the frame. It looked out of place amid the quiet decay, like a fresh wound on something long dead. Caleb's throat tightened and he swallowed. He'd driven past this place dozens of times, but never dared get closer. The rumors told stories of family torn apart, vanished children, whispered arguments in the night, debts and betrayals that tore through the town's fragile peace. "Easy, Rook," Caleb whispered, stepping toward the porch. The wood groaned beneath his weight, and the cold wind slipped through the broken window, carrying a faint sound, a soft, almost imperceptible sobbing. Rook's ears flattened, hackles rising. The dog's nose twitched, and then, without warning, he bolted forward and slipped through the broken window into the house. Caleb's heart jumped. He dropped the leash but moved swiftly to follow, flashlight in hand. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with dust and mildew. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and every shadow seemed to stretch and shift as if alive. The faint sound of sobbing grew clearer, but it was not a child's cry. It was rawer, deeper, more desperate. "Rook!" Caleb called, voice low. The dog's barking answered from the back of the house, frantic and urgent. Caleb hurried, every step echoing down the narrow hallway lined with faded wallpaper yellowed by time and neglect. Rook was digging at the floor near the hearth, the bricks cold and cracked. Caleb knelt beside him, brushing away debris with shaking hands. His fingers hit something hard, a small wooden box, weathered and worn, almost swallowed by the dirt and dust. Caleb's breath hitched. He pried it open slowly. Inside was a collection of objects wrapped carefully in a brittle piece of cloth, a child's shoe, scuffed and worn, a faded photograph of a young boy, eyes wide and solemn, and a ragged teddy bear missing one glass eye. The room seemed to fall silent. Caleb stared at the items as if they might speak, as if they could explain the silence that had swallowed this house for so many years. A sudden sound behind him made him spin. A shadow moved in the doorway. A woman, thin and gaunt, eyes rimmed red, clothes hanging loosely from her frame. "Who's there?" Caleb's voice was steady but wary. She looked at the box in his hands, and her face twisted with pain. "Those belong to Ethan," she whispered. "My boy." Caleb's heart clenched. The name matched the stories he'd heard. Ethan Greer, the missing boy who vanished nearly 10 years ago without a trace. "Where is he now?" Caleb asked gently. The woman's eyes filled with tears, But she looked away, shoulders shaking. "I don't know," she said. "I've been waiting for someone to find him to tell me the truth." Caleb lowered the box, feeling the weight of years in that single confession. The woman's name was Lillian Greer, the estranged mother who had disappeared from town soon after Ethan vanished. The community had written her off. Some whispered she'd lost her mind, others that she knew more than she'd ever admit. "Why didn't you come forward?" Caleb asked softly. "Because I was afraid," she said, "of what would happen if the truth came out. Afraid of what my family had become." As the sky darkened outside, Caleb felt the house close in around them. A vault of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Rook settled at his feet, sensing the fragile moment. Caleb's radio crackled. Faint voices calling for backup and a forensic team. He nodded toward Lillian. "Let's get you somewhere safe. We're just beginning." The night dragged on. The forensic team worked meticulously, uncovering traces of a life lived in fear. Hidden rooms behind false walls, worn footprints in the dusty floor, faded letters stained with tears and time. Each discovery chipped away at the silence, revealing fractures in a family's facade. Betrayals whisper behind closed doors, debts owed and more than money. Caleb found a tattered journal tucked beneath a loose floorboard near the nursery. The handwriting was small, childlike, but the words were chilling. A record of a boy trapped in a home where love and fear were inseparable. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the house whole, while Caleb felt the weight of a truth long buried pressed down on him. And in the shadows, something watched, waiting for the past to finally be unearthed. The sun had long surrendered to a blanket of gray clouds, and the rain was steady now, a cold drizzle that slicked the roads and made the old farmhouse seem even more isolated, a relic sinking into the earth. Caleb sat in the sheriff's office, the pale glow of the desk lamp casting shadows over the case files and evidence scattered before him. The tattered journal from the house lay open, each page a fragile echo of Ethan Greer's voice, a boy trapped by silence and fear. Mara Collins, a detective assigned to the case, sat across from him, her eyes heavy with exhaustion and something else, determination sharpened by years of chasing ghosts in this quiet town. She tapped a pencil against her notebook, careful not to disturb the fragile thread they were following. "Ethan's last entries talk about hiding," Mara said softly. "About a man in the house who wasn't his father. Someone who scared him. He wrote about secret meetings in the barn, whispered threats through the walls." Caleb nodded, fingers tapping on the journal's worn leather cover. "And the letters we found buried outside," he said, "from Harold Greer to Frank Caldwell." Harold was desperate, afraid someone was coming for him. Mara's eyes darkened. "Frank Caldwell is a local businessman with a reputation for ruthless deals. He vanished for a few years after Harold disappeared. When he came back, the town whispered about his disappearance, too. No one asked questions." Caleb exhaled slowly. "The deeper we dig, the more it feels like this wasn't just a family tragedy. It's something darker, a web of lies stretching back years." Outside the window, the rain tapped a relentless rhythm against the glass. The air was thick with secrets, and Caleb could feel the weight pressing down like the storm outside. Back at the farmhouse, the forensics team moved carefully, uncovering more hidden spaces. A crawl space beneath the stairs, stuffed with discarded belongings and rotting papers. Caleb crouched beside the team leader as they lifted a loose floorboard. Underneath lay a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth, sealed tight against the years. Inside were letters, desperate, handwritten notes from Lillian Greer to someone named H, begging for protection, pleading for her son's safety. Caleb unfolded one, his voice low as he read aloud. "They're watching. I don't know who to trust anymore. If anything happens to me or Ethan, you have to find him." The team leader looked up, grim. "This house was a prison, Caleb. Someone kept him hidden, or at least tried to." Rook growled softly from the corner, nose pressed to the ground near the broken window. Caleb followed the dog's gaze. "There," Caleb said. "Rook's trying to tell us something." Outside, the garden was churned up where they'd found the first box, but near the old apple tree at the property's edge, Rook pawed furiously at the earth. Caleb knelt, brushing away the sodden soil. His fingers hit something hard, a rusted tin box, sealed tight. The forensic team arrived, carefully pried it open, revealing a collection of documents, a faded diary, medical records, and photographs. Among them was a picture of Ethan with a woman Caleb recognized immediately, his Aunt Sarah Greer. Sarah had been the golden child of the family, the one who left town years ago, escaping the shadows that haunted the farmhouse. She had refused all contact with Lillian and Harold after Ethan's disappearance. Caleb's phone buzzed with new text. Frank Caldwell seen leaving town. Possible flight. Mara was already on the phone, arranging an urgent interview. The rain had eased when Mara and Caleb drove to Sarah Greer's home, a modest farmhouse miles outside Mill Creek, surrounded by sprawling fields. The house was neat, but the air of tension was unmistakable when Sarah opened the door. Her face was sharp, her eyes wary but filled with pain. "You're here about Ethan," she said without greeting. Caleb nodded. "We need to know everything you remember. Your family, the last time you saw him." Sarah stepped aside and motioned them in. She led them to the worn kitchen table, where a single photograph rested beneath a glass paperweight. Ethan, smiling faintly, clutching the same teddy bear with a missing eye. "I love my nephew," she said quietly, voice breaking. "But my brother, Harold, he was a dangerous man. The debts he owed, the threats. I warned Lillian to leave, to take Ethan away, but she was trapped." Caleb leaned forward. "Trapped how?" Sarah's eyes flashed with bitterness. "By her own silence. By the town. By the lies everyone chose to believe. There were people who wanted Harold gone, and Ethan with him. I think Frank Caldwell was one of them." Mara pulled out a folder, sliding the letters and diary pages across the table. "Do you recognize these?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "They're from Lillian. She wrote to me in secret, begging for help. I wanted to help, but by then it was too late." A sudden noise outside startled them. A truck pulling up fast, tires splashing mud in the driveway. Caleb stood quickly, hand resting on his holstered pistol. Through the window, they saw Frank Caldwell stepping down from the truck, eyes cold and calculating. Inside, the confrontation was inevitable. Frank's voice was smooth, but every word was a calculated cut. "You're digging up ghosts that should have stayed buried," he said, eyes flicking to Caleb and Mara. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "People deserve to know the truth." Frank laughed bitterly. "Truth? You want the truth? It's ugly. The Greers were drowning in debts. Harold made enemies. When he threatened to expose us all, we made sure he and that boy disappeared. Simple as that." Caleb felt his jaw tighten, fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. "You'll face justice for this." Frank smiled coldly. "Justice? In Mill Creek? You're out of your depth." But as Frank turned to leave, Caleb noticed something, a small scar on his wrist, half hidden by his sleeve. The same scar described in Lillian's diary as belonging to the man who'd come for them. It was the final piece. The days that followed were a blur of arrests, court hearings, and broken families forced to face unbearable truths. The town whispered and stared, but Caleb felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. He visited the farmhouse one last time before it was sealed for good. The broken window caught the morning light, glinting like a fractured memory. Rook padded beside him as Caleb knelt, brushing dirt from the spot where they found the first box. The past was painful, but finally it was no longer silent. The house was quiet now, but the silence was thick, weighted with the ghosts of its past. Caleb stood outside the broken window, the cold spring air biting at his cheeks. Fingers wrapped tight around the leash as Rook sat alert beside him, nose to the ground. The forensic team had long since finished, the dust of unearthed secrets still hanging in the air like smoke. The town of Mill Creek was abuzz with the news, arrests, revelations, the crumbling facade of a family long thought lost to rumor and sorrow. But Caleb knew the truth didn't end with Frank Caldwell's arrest. There was something else, a deeper fracture, a wound beneath the wounds. That morning, Lillian Greer had finally agreed to talk, truly talk, for the first time since her son disappeared. They met at the town's small diner, the clatter of dishes and low murmur conversation wrapping around them like a fragile cocoon. Her hands trembled as she stirred her coffee, eyes distant yet burning with a fierce pain. Ethan, he wasn't just a victim. she said quietly. He was caught in something no child should ever see. Something I buried to protect him and myself. Caleb listened as she told her story. A tangled web of betrayal, broken trust, and desperate choices. Harold Greer hadn't just disappeared because of debts or threats. He discovered something terrible, something Frank and others in town had tried to hide. A secret so dangerous they were willing to silence anyone who knew. Lillian had been warned to keep quiet, to stay away, but her maternal instinct had driven her to hide Ethan, to protect him at all costs. Until one night, when fear turned to tragedy, she broke down, tears spilling freely as she whispered the confession Caleb had been waiting for. I lost him. I buried him beneath the apple tree, hoping to keep him safe. But the silence almost killed me. Caleb's chest tightened. The image of the small grave beneath the tree came sharply into focus. Rook tugged on the leash, nose lifting to the wind. We need to go back, Caleb said softly. Back at the farmhouse, the morning sun pierced through broken windows, casting long shafts of light that danced among dust motes. Caleb and Mara followed Rook out to the orchard, where the twisted old apple tree stood sentinel, its gnarled branches reaching skyward like pleading hands. The earth beneath the tree was freshly disturbed, soft from recent rain. Rook began to dig with frantic urgency, paws churning the soil, scattering roots and earth. Caleb knelt, heart hammering, and joined the effort. After several tense minutes, his fingers brushed against something solid, a small wooden box, weathered and covered in dirt. He pulled it free and pried it open. Inside lay a folded bundle of cloth, wrapped carefully around a child's shoe, the teddy bear missing its glass eye, and a small, sealed envelope. Caleb's breath hitched as he carefully unfolded the note. It was Ethan's handwriting. If you find this, know I am free. I forgive you, Mother. I hope you find peace. The revelation settled over Caleb like a thunderclap. Ethan had not simply disappeared. He had found a way to leave the pain behind, a silent plea for forgiveness and hope. The quiet that followed was both devastating and healing. The town mourned, the Greer name finally given the dignity it had long been denied. Lillian was taken into custody, but with a gentle understanding, a mother broken by loss, not a criminal. Frank Caldwell's trial opened old wounds, his web of lies unraveling under the weight of evidence and confession. And Caleb found himself standing once more before the broken window, the place where the truth had first clawed its way out of darkness. Rook nudged his hand gently, a reminder of the bond forged through the long night. Weeks later, the farmhouse was sealed, its secrets now part of Mill Creek's buried history. Caleb sat on the porch of his own home, staring at the distant hills, the scent of pine and rain fresh in the air. Mara joined him, her expression softer now, weariness replaced by quiet resolve. We did what we could, she said. Caleb nodded. But some wounds, he said slowly, aren't meant to be forgotten. They're reminders of how fragile trust is and how strong hope must be. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky with bruised purples and gold. And somewhere in the stillness, the past and present folded together, leaving behind a fragile peace. The K-9 had stopped at the broken window, and what was dug up inside changed not just a family, but a whole town. Because sometimes the darkest truths are buried where no one dares to look, until the courage to face them finally arrives.